Let's begin by comparing summative and formative assessment. Summative assessment tools are designed to determine whether a student has mastered a competency or not, while formative assessment is used to determine how well students are progressing towards the development of a competency. Number 2, summative assessment tools are graded and require a specific passing score, while formative assessment is never graded. 3, summative assessment tools are administered at the end of a period of instruction, while formative assessment is more frequent and specific. And number 4, the score a student gets is relevant to determine if he needs to repeat the course or he can go to the next one. And finally, formative assessment's goal is to provide feedback rather than determining if the student needs to pass or not. Formative assessment is about providing feedback about strengths and weaknesses. Let's look at examples of summative assessments for receptive skills, productive skills, and integrated skills assessment. For receptive skills, you can have listening comprehension quizzes, intensive reading comprehension quizzes, extensive reading comprehension quizzes, contextualized vocabulary quizzes, video-based quizzes. Now let's talk about productive skills. You can assess them by oral presentations, role plays, individual interviews, recorded answers to questions, acting a story up, writing an answer for a question, writing a letter, completing a form. And what about integrated skills assessment? You can have a midterm or final test with a listening, reading, grammar, and vocabulary section. You can develop a research project in which students can hand in a report and do an oral presentation. You can group work projects representing real-life scenarios as simulating a market or having exchanges, and the creation of portfolios. Let's describe formative assessment in language learning. There are 3 steps in formative assessment. Number 1, observing. Number 2, keeping records. And number 3, providing feedback. When we talk about observing, you have to pay attention to students' behavior during everyday class activities. And as students work, pay attention and identify common errors among students, challenging grammar structures or pronunciation patterns, students with a slower learning rate, and students with common challenges in macro skills. With this information, you need to keep records, and remember, these are not grades. These records are useful to find the right strategies. How can you get these records? First, you can administer short controls to verify content mastery and macro skill development, and keep a record of the result to identify consistent deficiencies that need extra attention. Number 2, you can keep a diary with notes from your observations in daily class activities. Number 3, pay attention to self-confidence and emotional filter in the class. Number 4, allow students to do self-assessment and keep records of students' opinions. And finally, create lists of students with similar learning needs or similar strengths. Remember that as teachers, we keep a lot of information, and these records are very important for you to take a reference and identify the strategies. Now that you have identified strategies, you are ready to provide feedback. But when you provide feedback, take the following into account. Use strategies that are assertive for error correction. Do not target students individually or in front of the class. It's better to call them and talk to them privately, because remember, your objective is to help them, not to frustrate them. You have to group low-paced students with students that can help them, and you can share sample work of other students so that they can have a reference. And if it's necessary, review and reteach content that has not been assimilated by students. So, remember the process: observing, keeping records, and providing feedback.